When I caught the HOA secretly selling 1,700 acres of my family's generational farmland, I decided to remind them who controls their water supply. What would you do if you discovered your neighbors were stealing everything you've worked your entire life to build? Comment below where you're watching from. The morning was perfect for planting, clear blue skies with just enough breeze to keep cool. I was on my tractor before sunrise. The same way my grandfather taught me 30 years ago. My phone buzzed for the fifth time, but I ignored it. Nothing was more important than getting these seeds in the ground. My family has owned this 2,000-acre farm for 4 generations, and the spring planting wait for no one, not even angry neighbors. When I finally checked my messages at lunch, I almost choked on my sandwich. 10 missed calls from neighbors, 3 voicemails from my cousin, and a formal letter in my email from Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association, with the subject line violation notice. I couldn't believe what I was reading. They were claiming my tractor noise violated their peaceful enjoyment by loss, and my chicken coos created offensive odors affecting their property values. The new housing development had only been there for 8 months. My farm had been here since 1892. The letter ended with a demand to cease all farming operations within 500 feet of their property line within 48 hours, or face a $200 daily fine. I laughed out loud. They had no authority over my land. I crumpled the paper and tossed it aside. The next morning I woke to the sound of a car door slamming. A woman in a crisp white pantsuit was marching across my front yard, clipboard in hand, trailed by 2 men in polo shirts with the Oak Estates logo. "Mr. Jackson," she called out as I stepped onto my porch. "I'm Karen Wilson, president of the Oak Estates HO. We need to discuss your continued violations." I crossed my arms. "There's nothing to discuss. Your HOA has no jurisdiction over my property." Karen's plastic smile didn't falter. "Actually, according to the county zoning board, your agricultural exemption expired last year. Your property is now subject to our community standards as outlined in the Municipal Code Section 42.3. That caught me off guard. My property tax bills certainly hadn't changed. My family has farmed this land for over 100 years. I said no HOA can suddenly claim authority over it. Karen's smile turned cold. "Times change. We have standards now. Our residents paid premium prices for homes with guaranteed property values." She handed me another notice. "This is an official cease and desist. The board has unanimously voted to enforce these restrictions." As they left, my cousin Tom called. He lived in Oak Estates and served on the town council. "They've been planning this for months." He warned, "Something strange is happening. Karen's been having private meetings with developers and changing meeting minutes after they're approved." I spent that night digging through county records online. My agricultural exemption was still valid for another 5 years. Karen had lied straight to my face. For the next week, I continued working my fields as usual, ignoring the increasingly threatening letters. Then came the noise complaints to the sheriff, who apologetically explained he had to respond to each one. "Look, Mike," said Sheriff Davis, an old high school friend, "I know this is ridiculous, but they're filing for complaints every single day. They've even started a petition claiming your farm is a public nuisance." I couldn't believe how quickly things were escalating. "Dave, my family has been feeding this county longer than that development has had paved roads. What's really going on here?" He lowered his voice. "I shouldn't tell you this, but there was a closed-door meeting last week. County commissioners, some developer from the city, and the HOA board. They're pushing hard for some big project." That afternoon I spotted strange ERS in suits walking my eastern fields, taking pictures and measurements. I drove my truck across the field to confront them. "Can I help you, gentlemen? You're trespassing on private property." A tall man in an expensive suit extended his hand. "James Miller, Westview Development Corporation. Just surveying the land for preliminary planning." "Planning for what exactly?" "This is my farm." Miller looked confused, consulting his tablet. "According to our paperwork, Westview purchased 1,100 acres from Oak Estates 3 weeks ago. Construction begins next month for the new Oak Common Shopping Center and luxury condos." My heart nearly stopped. "That's impossible. I never sold my land to anyone." He showed me the digital documents on his tablet, survey maps of my eastern fields bearing official county stamps and signatures. The owner listed was Oak Ridge Estates Community Trust. "There must be some mistake," I said, my voice suddenly hoarse. "No mistake, sir," Miller replied. "Perhaps you should contact Oak. The sale was finalized last month." I raised home and pulled out my property deeds from the safe. Everything looked in order, but something wasn't right. I called the county recorder's office. "I need to verify the current ownership status of my property," I explained. The clerk took my information. "One moment, so." The silence stretched too long. "Mr. Jackson, there appears to be an ownership division filing from 6 weeks ago. According to our record, the majority of the property, approximately 1,700 acres, was transferred to Oak Estates Community Trust. You retain ownership of only the main house and surrounding 300 acres." My hand started shaking. "That's impossible. I never signed any transfer. The documents have your signature, sir. Do you want me to email you copies?" When I opened the email, I stared at what appeared to be my own signature on transfer documents I'd never seen before. How could this happen? How could the HO Sell land they didn't own. I looked out my window and spotted Karen in her luxury SUV parked at the edge of my property, talking on her phone while staring directly at my house. When she saw me watching, she smiled and waved. The bulldozers would arrive in 4 weeks. I had less than a month to figure out how the HOA had stolen my family's legacy and stop them before the first shovel hit the ground. I stood frozen in my muddy boots as the surveyor's words hit me like a thunderbolt. My land sold without my knowledge. Impossible. There must be a mistake, I said, showing him the property maps I kept in my truck. This has been Johnson family land for over a century. The surveyor scratched his head. Look, I just go where they tell me, but these coordinates match what Oak Ridge Estates provided. My hands trembled as I drove straight to the county records office. The clerk, Mrs. Rivera, had known my family for decades. Frank, I was going to call you, she said, her face worried. Someone filed new property documents last month. I thought it was strange, but everything seemed properly notarized. She pulled up the records on her computer. My stomach dropped as I saw it. Official look paperwork showing 1,700 acres of my farmland now belong to Oak Estates HOA. Only the 300 acres around my house remained in my name. This is fraud, I whispered. These signatures aren't mine. I called an emergency meeting with my lawyer, Sam Grayson. This is the most raisin land grab I've seen in 30 years of practice, Sam said, examining the documents, but they covered their tracks. Well, the paperwork claims your grandfather sold development rights decades ago and they're just now exercising them. That's ridiculous. My grandfather would never. I know, Sam nodded, but fighting this will take time. They've already sold to developers who likely had no idea the sale was fraudulent. I couldn't wait. The HOA had their monthly meeting that evening, and I was going to crash it. The Oid Community Center buzzed with conversation when I walked in. Karen Wilson sat at the center table, her designer outfit and perfect blonde hair making her look like she belonged on a reality TV show, not running a neighborhood association. The room fell silent when people noticed me. This is a private meeting, Karen said coldly. Private like the private sale of my land, I replied, my voice steady despite my racing heart. Richard Thompson, the treasurer, adjusted his glasses. Nervous. Why, we have no idea what you're talking about. Really? Then why are there surveyors on my eastern fields today? Why is there paperwork claiming you sold 1,700 acres of my family farm to Greed Corp developers? Karen's fake smile didn't reach her eyes. Perhaps you should check your family records more carefully. That land was included in our development zone from the beginning. Richard slid some papers across the table. It's all perfectly legal. The sale is final. I glanced at the documents. More for fees showing land boundaries that had never existed. My family has the original deeds from 1892. I said, these papers are fake, and you know it. That's a serious accusation, said Janet Miller, another board member, who looked genuinely confused. Karen assured us this was all above board. Karen shot Janet a warning look. The matter is settled. Security, please escort Mr. Johnson out. A retired police officer who worked part-time security moved toward me. Sorry, Frank, just doing my job. As I was outside, my neighbor Tom Baker followed me to the parking lot. Tom had moved to Oak just a year ago, seeking the rural lifestyle that was now threatened. They've been planning this for months, he whispered, looking over his shoulder nervously. Secret meetings, discussions about expanding the community footprint. Why didn't anyone tell me? I asked. Karen threatened anyone who spoke up. Jeff Winters questioned the legality last month and suddenly had $5,000 in HOA violations. They can fine people into bankruptcy if they want to. I drove home in a daze, my family legacy crumbling around me. The farm that had fed the community for generations was about to become cookie-cutter houses and strip malls. Unable to sleep, I pulled out my grandfather's old wooden chest among birth certificates and yellowed photographs I found it. The original water rights agreement from 1943. The document detailed how my grandfather had allowed the creation of a reservoir on our property that now supplied water not just to our farm but to the entire surrounding area, including what was now Oak Estates. I read deeper, my excitement growing. The agreement included specific terms. Agricultural use would always take priority in water allocation decisions, and the rights were tied to the original homestead, the 300 acres I still legally owned. At dawn, I called Sam again. They might have stolen my land through fake papers, I said, but they forgot something crucial. What's that? Sam asked, yawning. Who controls their water? Sam was silent for a moment. Frank, be careful, this could get ugly. They started ugly, I replied. I'm just finishing it fairly. After hanging up, I noticed a bulldozer cresting the hill on my eastern field. Construction was starting already. Through binoculars, I could see Karen standing with men in suits pointing excitedly at my best wheat field. I opened my laptop and began researching everything I could about water rights, easements and local utility regulations. If they thought they could steamroll a simple farmer, they were about to learn how wrong they were. That afternoon I visited old Mr. Patterson, who had maintained the county's water systems for 40 years before retiring. Of course I remember that system, he said, spreading out faded blueprints on his kitchen table. Your granddad was smart. The main control junction is right here on your remaining property. Always has been. I took photos of The blueprints with my phone. What are you planning, Frank? Mr. Patterson asked, his eyes sharp despite his age. Just making sure I understand my rights, I replied. That night as I walked my property line watching the lights of Oak Estates twinkle in the distance, I made my decision. I wouldn't just fight for my land, I would show Karen and her corrupt board exactly who they were messing with. I picked up my phone and made 3 calls, first to Sam, then to the local newspaper, and finally to the state Water Authority. The game was about to change. What I didn't know was that Karen had just hosted a champagne celebration for select HOA members and developers, promising them that construction would be finished within a year, their property values would skyrocket, she assured them, and that eyesore farm would finally be gone. Little did they know what would happen when they turned on their taps tomorrow morning. The sound of bulldozers ripping into my family's farmland woke me at dawn. I rushed outside in my Pommers to find massive yellow machines tearing up the rich soil that had fed our community for generations. My stomach dropped as I watched crops being destroyed right before my eyes. Stop, you can't do this, I shouted, waving my arms frantically. The workers ignored me, continuing their destruction as if I wasn't even there. Karen Wilson drove up in her shiny black SUV, designer sunglasses hiding her eyes. She stepped out wearing high heels that sank into the soft earth. Progress waits for no one, she said with a smirk, taking photos with her phone. Oaked Villas will be the most exclusive address in the county, 30 homes starting at just 7 figures each. I felt sick. This land grows food for thousands of people. You can't just turn it into luxury homes. We already did. Karen laughed, showing me her phone screen with a digital rendering of massive houses where my cornfields once stood. The papers are signed. The county approved the zoning change last week. As she drove away, I noticed she deliberately splashed mud onto my boots. I stood there, hands shaking with anger, watching years of hard work disappear under the bulldozer tracks. My neighbor Emma called that evening. Have you seen what they're posting online? The HOA is bragging about their acquisition all over social media. I checked their page and found Karen posing with Richard Thompson and the developer's champagne glasses raised high. The caption read, "Expanding Oak Estates, goodbye outdated farming, hello luxury living." The comment section was filled with angry responses from locals who relied on my farm for fresh produce. At least the community was on my side, but that wouldn't save my land. That night I couldn't sleep. I paced my kitchen until 3 a.m. reviewing every document my family had kept over the years. Birth certificates, death records, tax forms, and property maps covered my table. Then I found it, my great-grandfather's original water rights agreement from 1922. I read it carefully, then read it again. A slow smile spread across my face. At sunrise I called my old college friend Sarah, now a water rights attorney. They didn't do their homework, she confirmed after reviewing my documents. Your family owns the water rights to the entire valley. The easement only grants usage to others as long as it doesn't interfere with agricultural needs. I knew exactly what to do. By noon I was at the County Water Authority office filing paperwork. The clerk's eyes widened as she processed my request. Are you sure about this? She asked. This will affect hundreds of homes. I'm very sure, I replied calmly. I'm redirecting the water allocation, as is my legal right. 2 days later I was eating breakfast when my phone started buzzing with notifications. Facebook messages, texts, and voicemails poured in from Ode residents. Their water had slowed to a trickle, then stopped completely. Karen called 17 times before I answered. What did you do? She screamed so loudly I had to hold the phone away from my ear. Nothing illegal, I replied, buttering my toast. I simply exercised my water rights as specified in the original easement agreement. The document states I can prioritize agricultural usage. People need water to live, Richard shouted in the background. People need food too, I countered. I'm redirecting all water to my remaining 300 acres. I'm intensifying production there since you stole the rest of my farmland. Karen's voice turned sickeningly sweet. Listen, maybe we moved too quickly. We can discuss some compensation. The time for talking was before you falsified documents and stole my property. I interrupted. Now I'm just protecting what's left. I hung up and walked outside. The sun felt good on my face as I inspected the irrigation system I'd modified. Water that once supplied the entire valley now flowed only to my remaining fields. An hour later 3 police cars pulled up my driveway. Sheriff Miller stepped out first. I'd known him since high school. Got complaints about water tampering, he said, looking uncomfortable. I handed him my documentation. Everything I've done is legal. My family has owned these water rights for over a century. While he reviewed the papers, a news van arrived. Karen must have called them thinking they'd take her side. The reporter Julie Ramirez from Channel 5 approached me with a microphone. Can you explain what's happening with the water supply? She asked. I smiled. I'd be happy to, I said, pulling out maps showing the original property lines and water rights documents. And I'd also like to discuss how the Oak Ridge HOA falsified documents to steal 1,700 acres of farmland that's been in my family for generations. Julie's eyes lit up. She Clearly recognized a bigger story than a water dispute by evening. The HOA called an emergency meeting. I wasn't invited, but my neighbor Tom texted me updates throughout. They freaking out. He wrote developers halted construction. They're threatening to sue the HOA for misrepresentation. Property values are already dropping. At 11:42 p.m. my doorbell rang. Karen stood there, her perfect makeup smudged to confident posture gone. Please, she whispered, her voice cracking. Turn the water back on. People have children, elderly parents, they can't stay in homes without water. I leaned against the doorframe. Sounds serious. Maybe they should be angry at the people who created this situation. We can talk about compensation, she offered desperately. I looked her straight in the eyes. Compensation isn't enough. I want my land back. Karen's face hardened. That's impossible. The contracts are signed. Then I guess we have nothing more to discuss, I replied, starting to close the door. Wait, she cried out. The developers, they might be willing to reconsider if there's a water issue. I can set up a meeting. I paused, considering her offer. Tomorrow 9 a.m. my kitchen table. Bring the developers, your lawyer, and all those fake documents you used to steal my land. As Karen hurried back to her car, I noticed lights on in every house in Oak Estates. Nobody was sleeping tonight. They were all wondering the same thing. How had they never questioned where their water came from? My hands shook as I entered the courthouse. Cameras flashed in my face. Someone had tipped off the local news about our battle. The judge had rushed our hearing after 3 days without water, had left Oak Estates in chaos. Some families had checked into hotels just to take showers. The courtroom was split down the middle. On one side sat Karen and the HOA board members in their designer clothes looking confident. On the other side were my supporters, farmers in work boots and practical clothes who relied on my land for their livelihoods. All rise. The Baith called as Judge Martinez entered. Karen smirked at me from across the aisle. She thought she had this in the bag. Little did she know what was coming. My lawyer M. Rodriguez started by showing aerial photos of my family's farm dating back to the 1950s. Your Honor, this land has been continuously farmed by the same family for over 130 years, she explained. I'd like to enter into evidence the original land grant from 1892. Karen's lawyer jumped up. Objection. Old documents are irrelevant. We have a modern legal sale agreement signed just last month. Judge Martinez frowned. I'll determine what's relevant. Continue, Miss Rodriguez. My heart pounded as Miss Rodriguez unveiled our secret weapon, a large map showing all the water lines in the county. This property controls the water access for the entire region, she explained. The easement agreement specifically states that agricultural use takes priority in any WATE